Hello and you're welcome to this video on the COVID-19 return to play guidelines as they come into effect from today, the 20th of September. My name is Conor Falgin and I am the National Governance Officer for Badminton Ireland, and we'll just get into the video here. So just an introduction in terms of what we will cover throughout the video. So we will cover just around some of the club play guidelines, players, coaches, juveniles, spectators, and also just we'll have an outline in terms of some of the resources that are available to clubs and players and coaches as we move through the easing of restrictions. In terms of club play, obviously from a starter point of view, as we've covered in some of the recent webinars on return to play, it's important that clubs liaise with their facility provider. Some of the issues we've taken in recently around some of the queries that we've had and frequently asked questions that have come in from clubs have centred around issues such as use of changing rooms and access to certain parts of the hall. So it's important to liaise with your facility provider in those circumstances. Some facilities are allowing certain numbers of people to use changing rooms. Other facilities are still not allowing use of the changing rooms at present. So it's important to cover that off with your facility provider on returning to play. In terms of the recommended guidelines, Badminton Ireland has recommended that clubs use the pods of 6 model for return to play. That means that doubles and singles play is allowed, and what we've recommended is that a pod of 6 remains per court. So we'll have a look briefly at how that might work in a 1 court and a 3 court hall. There is a maximum of 50 allowed in the hall with the pods of 6 system. So you may have 3 pods of 6, 3 courts, and you may have another pod waiting, as long as they can physically distance from each other. That is how the pods of 6 are essentially expected to interact, that they keep a physical distance of 2 meters apart whilst in the hall. We also are recommending that COVID-19 officers be present to ensure compliance with the guidelines, and the COVID-19 officers also have a role to play in the review or the completion of a COVID-19 risk assessment. The risk assessment template is available for download on the Badminton Ireland website, and if you have any issues in completing the COVID-19 risk assessment, you can get in touch with myself and I'll be able to help you out with that, as I have done with many clubs throughout returning to play. In terms of the face mask coverings, they should be worn throughout any phase of being indoors in the hall other than being on the badminton court. For players, coaches would be expected to wear the face mask or face covering at all stages, and any spectators would also be expected to wear their face mask or covering whilst indoors. In terms of a 1 court hall, this is how it may look. So you may have an entry or an exit at opposite ends of the hall. So it's important just to note that that may not be possible across all badminton halls across the country. So what you can do is simply ensure that you have a time delay between people entering the hall and people exiting the hall. Again, you're keeping your physical distance where possible, and coaches are keeping a physical distance from players as well. So if there is another pod of 6 coming in after that, and the entry and the exit are at the same end of the hall, just making sure there's a bit of a delay in the time there. In terms of a 3 court hall, it may appear a little bit more frantic, but again, this is how it may look. So again, you're managing your courts as appropriate. Again, your entry and exit may be different, so it's how you're going to manage that egress and ingress into the hall. And also just to cover off as well, another question that has been asked quite a number of times across a number of clubs is, can a coach coach across multiple pods? And yes, there's no issue there. So long as the coach keeps a physical distance, there's no issue. You have your two coaches here, so they can be coaching any of the three courts. Okay, so it's just a case of them remaining external to the pod, keeping a physical distance of 2 meters from players, and being able to coach them from there. There's no issue with that. Clubs may also decide to use the 100 fully vaccinated participants model instead of the pods of 6. Government guidelines do allow for this. There is additional risk as far as we can see it, where the information pertaining to individuals' vaccination status is seen as a special category of data under the GDPR. Also, if it is a case that a unvaccinated participant takes part in one of these sessions under this model, that would be a breach of public health guidelines. So again, there is, just to highlight that there is risk there with adopting this model, and there has to be safeguards put in place by clubs if they are adopting this model. Clubs can only operate one system at a time, so it cannot be a case that a club decides, right, we have 6 unvaccinated participants, so they can play in a pod of 6 over there. We can have 94 other vaccinated participants over here operating on this side of the court. That is unfortunately not how this particular system works. You either adopt the pod of 6 model or the 100 fully vaccinated participants. Clubs have authority in how the guidelines are implemented, and again, it's just making sure that that in line with your club rules, and that communication is flowing between the club to its participants, that this is how the guidelines are being implemented within your club, and any breaches of those guidelines will be dealt with by your club, and you have the authority to do so. In terms of players, it's just a case of reminding players of what the COVID guidelines outline. So again, in terms of physical distancing, that between pods, that there should be that physical distance of 2 meters. Also, just physical distancing once leaving the venue, and that there's no hanging around, as well as we cover in the bottom bullet point there in terms of entering and exiting the hall. That essentially we're making sure that players are just acting in line with the public health guidance. Again, in terms of face masks and coverings, that those are worn at all times when indoors and not on court. In terms of hygiene, players should be reminded to bring their own towel and water bottle where possible, and that there should be no sharing of any equipment as such. Okay. Also important to remind players to sanitize on entry and exit from the hall, and that if they are coming to play in the club, that they should inform the club either through a pre-booking system set up by the club, or by responding via communication, etc., with the club night organizer. Okay. In terms of coaches' responsibilities, again, I have touched on this already, that coaches can coach across pods. It's important that the coaches maintain a physical distance from players. The coach must wear a face mask or covering at all times, even whilst on court. Any equipment that's provided by the coach should be only handled by the coach, in terms of coaching apparatus, any cones or any specific pieces of equipment that are used for training purposes should only be handled by the coach. In terms of online payment options, they should be used if possible, where payment is to be made. And again, it's a good idea for the coach to liaise with either the facility provider, who may be allowing the coach to use the facility for private lessons, or the club, if the club has requested for the coach to come into a club session, on what the necessary measures are. So there is a coach's COVID-19 risk assessment available for coaches who may be delivering private sessions. If they need some assistance in that, there is a template available. And also, if the club has already completed a COVID-19 risk assessment, it's just outlining with the coach that these are the measures that are currently in place to limit the risk of a COVID-19 outbreak there. So for juveniles, again, we recommend pods of 6. Same rules applies with players. Parents and guardians spectating must be vaccinated. Under 18s are not required to be vaccinated as part of the 100 vaccinated participants model. So if you are to have 20 under 18s participate in an adult club session, they are not required to be vaccinated. So they can participate in the 100 vaccinated participants model, though that would mean that you're left with 80 vaccinated participants that are over the age of 18. Again, spectators, up to 50 people spectating allowed with mixed community status. That is with vaccinated and unvaccinated persons. All spectators must wear a face mask covering whilst indoors. And again, with the 50 people, it's important that there is a physical distance maintained between spectators. Again, this is very much subject to what hall space is available, and in a lot of halls up and down the country, it may not be possible for 50 people to be spectating. As much as 100 participants in a hall may not be feasible either. So we just have to remember that it's really what the hall limits us to, and to manage that as best as we can. In terms of the 100 vaccinated participants model, it does allow for 60% of venue capacity, where clubs have adopted this particular model. So just to outline a number of resources that are now available to our clubs, players, coaches and our volunteers. So the Blockworks contact tracing app is available to our clubs in terms of a club management system that will provide a bit of security around the return to play. Clubs can set up their sessions on the app, and players can confirm their COVID status, I suppose, in terms of that they are fit and healthy to play, and confirm all those relevant details there. Lauren has a number of video resources that are available on the Badminton Ireland website there as well, that will support clubs, and if you have any issues with setting this up for your club, it would be worthwhile getting in touch with Lauren, who'll be able to help you out with this process. Sport Ireland also has a return to sport e-learning course, which is very useful for any players, coaches or parents that are maybe looking a bit more information on return to sport. There is an additional piece on this course for COVID-19 officers. Badminton Ireland also has a COVID-19 officer specific course, just to basically detail some of the current guidelines as well. So that training has been updated. So if anyone wishes to do that, you can do that through the online form that we have available for that. Also, we have the risk assessment templates available for download as well. And if you have any issues with any of these, you can get in touch with either myself or Lauren, and we'll be happy to help you out with getting through some of those. So there are mine and Lauren's contact details. We have been helping a number of clubs with queries. We've also released an FAQ document, and we will be updating that as we go along. There will be more and more questions coming in, so keep an eye out for those updates. Lauren is available to contact in terms of any of the Blockworks contact tracing app setup or anything like that within your club, and I will assist you with any of the guideline issues, or maybe just any questions you might have in terms of getting your club back up and operational again. So also just to point out that we do have the This is Badminton campaign currently running as well, and the website has been set up through a link on our main website, and the This is Badminton campaign will run a series of regional campaigns and regional events, and basically to support and to grow the sport back as we come out of the restrictions. So please keep an eye on social media and through our website just in terms of any upcoming events which will be promoted in the not too distant future as we come out of these restrictions. So I hope the video has been of some benefit to you. If you, like I said, if you do have any questions or queries, please get in touch with myself or Lauren. We also have a COVID-19 query form which is available as well. So if you have any questions that come in there, we will update those on the FAQ document on a kind of couple of days or by a weekly basis, depending on how many queries we have coming in. So again, if you have any issues or questions, don't be afraid to get in touch with us in Badminton Ireland, and we will do our best to help you out as we get back to playing. All right, thanks very much for your time, and again, all the best for the season ahead.